We're back with the breaking news out of Ohio this hour. Billionaire Les Wexner is still being deposed by members of the House Oversight Committee over his ties to disgraced sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This as Democrats are raising questions over the rollout of those files and whether the DOJ is fully complying with the law. I want to bring in Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. So my understanding, Congressman, thank you for coming on, is that Les Wexner is still being deposed as we speak right now. My understanding is that he's also cooperating. So I think that's notable as we try to figure out what answers we might get. But it all comes as just this past weekend, the DOJ attempted to turn the page on the Epstein files by basically saying, we're done. We complied with the law. That's all. In your opinion, have they?
The victims aren't done. The victims want to talk to the Department of Justice. They came to our hearing last week when we had Pam Bondi, and they raised their hands and they said two things. One, they have information to give, and two, nobody at the Department of Justice will receive that information. And then, of course, there is still about half of the documents that have not yet been released. And there's this confusion as to whether investigations are taking place. The number two at the Department of Justice says we're all done. The Attorney General said that there are open investigations. Look, you don't have to be a former sexual assault prosecutor, and you don't have to be a father of a little girl to care about this. I'm a former sexual assault prosecutor, and I'm the father of a little girl, and I really care about this, and you can bet that it's not going to go away. But what I'm seeing here, Allie, is there's this confluence of the conduct around the Epstein files and protecting ICE agents, because we now have an America where we protect childhood sex predators and murderous ICE agents and not young girls, nurses, and moms. That's what this is about. It isn't about funding a certain agency. It's about finding out who we really are and who we want to be.
I think it's important that you highlight both of those issues because it feels like those are really the top two when it comes to my beat on Capitol Hill. So putting Epstein aside for a moment and focusing on the second thing that you brought in, the current partial government shutdown, it does seem like this could stretch on. But do you have any concerns about doing this, blocking ICE funding, even though ICE has its funding through reconciliation and really it's TSA and FEMA that might really feel the brunt of DHS staying shut down?
Well, I'll give you an example of who is thinking about this. I spoke a couple weeks ago in San Jose. I had a town hall there, and a woman who works at a grocery store told me that she's in the position where she leaves her midnight shift, walks to her parking spot. It's in the dark. There aren't a lot of people around. And she asked, if a van rolls up that's unmarked and a bunch of guys get out who are masked and ask me to get into their car, do I have to do it? Are they ICE? Or are they the bad guys? And that's the environment that ICE has created in our communities. And that's why we're insisting the masks come off, the identifications come out. They only target violent individuals, no more roving patrols. They have to go to a judge. There's a lot we can do to end their community terror. Otherwise, we're going to lose another nurse named Pretty and a mom named Good, and the bodies will pile up.
I agree with you that the actions on the ground in Minneapolis put this question of ICE funding, accountability for DHS, all in the spotlight on Capitol Hill. But also my understanding of where these bipartisan negotiations are is that they're kind of nowhere. So does that just mean we're not going to reopen DHS?
Well, it means Democrats are not going to co-sign or sanction public executions, because if we continue to fund ICE as is, if Democrats don't insist on reforms, then we are going to see more public executions. And we're not going to be a part of that. We don't want to sign off on it. We don't want to validate it in any way. And so if Republicans can't find the votes themselves, and they have the majority in the House and the Senate, then they're not going to get it from Democrats. If they want to negotiate to protect the community from what we're seeing across California and what we're seeing in Minnesota, they'll find partners. But we're not funding this ICE.
And I do think it's important to note that even as they have majorities, they don't have the numbers that they would need to pass this single-handedly and in partisan fashion. You know, at hand here is the decision to block federal funding for ICE, and you get to make that call in your current role as a member of Congress.
On the heels of that, I want to bring in MS Now's Akayla Gardner at the White House and Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief for USA Today. Welcome to you both. Susan, how challenging are those poll numbers for the White House less than 9 months now from Election Day?
Well, here's the reason they matter. A president's approval rating is tied to how his party does in midterm elections. And to be clear, to have your approval rating sink down into the 30s is pretty dismal for a president. In the past, that's meant the president's party has lost dozens of House seats. Now, we have fewer competitive House seats now than we used to have through gerrymandering and other factors. But that is a big red flag, I think, for Republicans who will be on the ballot in November.
So, Kayla, you have the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, who held a major strategy session last night with the president's top political advisors. And then you have some new reporting about those cracks emerging in the midterm strategy. What can you tell us?
Alex, the cracks that we've seen really are with key groups that President Trump outperformed with compared to most previous Republican presidential candidates. That includes Latino voters, independent voters, young people. These are all demographics where the president is seeing the biggest declines in his approval ratings. But last night, we're told that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles led a meeting with some dozens of allies and members of the Trump administration. And the key message that was really delivered in that meeting, and what I'm told has been the biggest feedback from Congress to the White House, is they want to see the president focus more on the economy and affordability. And we've seen the president go on this crisscross tour across the country where he's really been talking about it. But a key issue that Republicans have with the way that the president talks about the economy is they do have good economic data that we've seen on the inflation front, on the jobs front, but he's not really acknowledging the pain that Americans continue to feel. But we're hearing that the White House plans to deploy him and other members of his cabinet on popular podcasts. We've seen some riffs with key podcast hosts like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn. And so there's certainly awareness that need to shore up supports with people who listen to their podcasts, and certainly addressing some of the concerns that they've raised about ICE and the Epstein files.
But there's a lot more than that, Susan, because MS Now reports that at last night's meeting, the president's pollster, Tony Fabrizio, acknowledged that talking about closing the southern border, that doesn't resonate with voters. And it comes as a Reuters Ipsos poll shows Trump's immigration approval, that's hit a new low for him, 38%. When Republicans see record low numbers on one of Trump's key agenda items, could that be enough for some to start, putting some distance between themselves and the White House, or President Trump specifically, on the campaign trail?
Yeah, those immigration numbers of great concern. It was his handling of the immigration and the economy that were key factors in getting the president.
I love it. There's a couple of things about this, right? A lot of people are like, there's no way Texas can do this. And I'm here to tell you that even on day one of early voting, we are exploding with participation right now. And we just had two special elections, one that swung 30 points, another one that swung 17 points. We are really ready to do this in Texas. And frankly, right now, I will tell you what the insiders tell me. They tell me that he really doesn't like John Cornyn, so he just doesn't want to endorse him. We know that the Republicans have already spent $50 million trying to boost Senator Cornyn in this primary, yet he is still trailing Ken Paxton, who only raised $1 million last quarter. We also know that supposedly his chief of staff does not like Ken Paxton. So there's that. And then Wesley Hunt doesn't really have a shot. So he doesn't really know what to do. There are people that are pulling at him in different ways, trying to tell him what's most strategic to do. But there was a poll that actually dropped today that had me ahead of all three of them. So whichever way they decide to go, we're ready to win this thing.
I'm sure Donald Trump loves Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who may be the Democratic nominee, calling out his fearful strategy right now. You are known to so many people watching right now and so many people out there for a range of viral moments. I played kind of one of them from last week, but you've had so many of them, humorous jabs at Republicans on the Hill. But you're, of course, much more than that, as everybody is, but as everybody who's in elected office is. Often people are caricatured. What else do you wish more Texans knew about you?
Yeah, so first of all, I wish they knew that I actually started my political and legal career in rural East Texas, and that I served on the Agriculture Committee last cycle. So I'm that girl that actually can go into rural Texas, even though I represent the Dallas area. And I've been talking to our Texas farmers and ranchers way before I was looking at running for the U.S. Senate. I understand the challenges that are facing all Texans, whether you're talking about our farmers and ranchers that are currently filing record bankruptcies, or whether you're talking about that mother who may be sitting at home wondering whether or or not she's going to have enough money to pay for health care and food on our table. We are leading in uninsured in the country. We have been leading in uninsured for a very long time. But as someone who lived in rural East Texas, I know what it is to have to go to Shreveport or go to Dallas so that I can actually see a healthcare professional because there's not one that's there. Listen, the challenges that Texans are facing, especially as it relates to affordability, with us being one of the top exporting states in the entire country, they are real. And so we've got to rein in this out of control administration. We've got to make sure that we're getting these tariffs under control. We've got to start to grow our economy instead of continuing to shrink it. We've got to make sure that housing is a real dream that can be realized by all Texans. And so we've got to make sure that these terrible policies around immigration that are impacting us everywhere. The final point that I'll say, because I know you're ready to move on, but today was a really emotional day for me as I walked into a building and there was another business that was there. And a doctor came out at her facility and she said to me, I just want to tell you this story about someone that works in my office. She said, your security detail came in to do advance work and she went and hid under the desk in the office. She said, now she is a citizen, but she is a Latina. And she was so scared.
What is extremely clear is that Donald Trump is taking major losses, and Congress now feels confident enough to push back against him because those losses are real and they are continuing when Trump won again. And honestly, this reflects poorly on many Democrats who still haven't been held accountable. A lot of people started obeying in advance, even before he officially returned to power. Between November and while Joe Biden was still president, lawmakers passed deeply regressive, right-wing policies because they assumed Trump was about to take over. He was never truly popular. Yes, it was the least unpopular he had ever been, but he was still far more unpopular than Biden was at the beginning of his presidency. Biden didn't end popular, but early on he had strong approval. Still, many Republicans and far too many Democrats, not all, but too many, fell in line. What's happened since then, especially over the first year of his presidency, really within about 6 months, is that Trump has become increasingly unpopular. For the past 6 months, more and more lawmakers have been saying they won't pass his agenda and they won't fund what they see as nonsense. It creates a cycle. He looks weak, so people challenge him. When people challenge you, you look weaker. The weaker you appear, the more undecided lawmakers turn against you. And as more of them turn, the prescription of weakness grows. This isn't just happening in the halls of Congress. It's also showing up in the polls. The numbers make it very clear that Trump's support is dropping and is now dragging Republicans down with him. In 2024, believe it or not, he's actually held down by Republicans. This time,